Sadiq Khan has been at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool today, where he's been speaking about his night at Taylor Swift's Eras Tour at Wembley. It comes as the row over freebies rumbles on. Here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
For the first time since Boris Johnson was evicted from Downing Street, the Prime Minister is a London MP. So Sir Keir Starmer and London Labour Party members have plenty to celebrate at this year's conference, which was obvious from the Prime Minister's upbeat and light-hearted tone when he spoke to those members at a reception here in Liverpool.
It's been a busy few weeks since we started. I've been getting to know Larry the cat and bonding with him. And we realised we've both spent 14 years chasing pests out of Downing Street.
But the conference has been overshadowed by the row over freebies, which has put Labour politicians on the defensive.
Every Labour politician who received a gift has declared it. It wasn't the case, by the way, with the previous Tory government.
Did you go to see Taylor Swift?
I did. Yeah, I did. Was
it a freebie?
Well, no. Whenever I accept a gift over the last 8.5 years, I've always declared it.
The challenge for the Prime Minister is not just to shift the focus away from freebies, but, crucially for Labour Party members, to offer some sunshine after the recent gloom.
The Labour Party conference continues in Liverpool with today's focus on the Chancellor and spending. Questions then are bound to be asked of London's Labour mayor, who's opted to spend his own time in Manhattan rather than on Merseyside at the peak of his own party's annual meeting. It's, of course, the first one of his tenure that Labour are in government. Sadiq Khan's trip to New York has its own financial targets, eyeing up investment deals and promoting London as an unrivalled tourist destination. From Liverpool, our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Sadiq Khan's appearance at the Labour conference was, unusually, just a flying visit. He was here for barely 24 hours before jumping on a plane to New York to, as he puts it, bang the drum for London.
You've got to make sure you're speaking up about our city, showcasing our success, and making sure the world knows our country's back on the global stage. And as the mayor, I'm going to make sure that I support our country's recovery, but also make sure we carry on getting more businesses, more investment, more tourists, more students, more sporting events coming to London.
The mayor's transatlantic trip has been timed to coincide with the annual gathering of the United Nations Assembly, which attracts presidents and prime ministers from around the globe. Instead of listening to the Chancellor's speech today or the Prime Minister tomorrow, Sadiq Khan will be appearing on American TV shows, speaking at conferences and seeing what lessons London can learn from New York's efforts to clean up the Hudson River. City Hall observers wonder if the mayor's decision to swap Liverpool for New York might have something to do with his career ambitions.
That conscious decision has been made possibly with a look to the future and the possibility of a role beyond being Mayor of London, and there are plenty of roles in the UN and international organisations for the ex-mayors of big cities. So he might just be beginning to think about life after City Hall.
Sadiq Khan is not the first London mayor to make a beeline for New York, and this isn't his first visit. His political opponents at City Hall are cynical about the timing.
Sadiq Khan has made an 8-year career in London blaming every problem on not enough money from the government, and he's just had the message from the new Prime Minister that even under Labour there is not going to be more money. He needs to get on with the job, and his response seems to be to go to New York and give a lecture about climate change, which I don't think is what Londoners would expect their mayor to be doing.
The mayor's decision to swerve Liverpool also avoids potentially awkward encounters with the leaders of Labour-run Westminster Council. They were furious last week when he announced he was taking control of Oxford Street.
Simon, there's been a slightly confused message from City Hall about why this trip is happening.
Yes, Charlene, to begin with, we were told Sadiq Khan was going to New York in his capacity as Mayor of London. But now we're told he's also going in his capacity as chair of C40. That's the alliance of mayors from around the world who campaign on climate change. And some C40 events have been added to his schedule. Now, the mayor is travelling with 6 City Hall employees, including his photographer and video camera operator. And we're told that 5 of those people are having their costs covered by the C40 organisation. So only 2 of them are being paid for by London Council taxpayer. But to be truthful, or to be honest, it is quite unexpected that the mayor is spending so little time at this conference, especially after his and the government's election wins this year.
Simon.
Now, for the first time in 15 years, the Labour Party conference has heard a keynote speech from the Prime Minister. Sir Keir Starmer addressed delegates in Liverpool this afternoon. He batted away criticism over free Arsenal tickets and changes to pension credits by promising that his policies would get the country its future back, even offering a glimmer of hope for London's housing crisis. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Please welcome Keir Starmer, Prime Minister and leader of the Labour Party.
For Sir Keir Starmer, the cheers and applause were guaranteed. He's the first Labour leader to address a Labour conference as Prime Minister for 15 years. And he acknowledged there would be faltering steps.
Service doesn't mean we'll get everything right.
He cautioned that change wouldn't happen overnight.
This is a long-term project. I've never pretended otherwise.
When he called for restraint in the Middle East, an unfortunate slip of the tongue suggested nerves had got the better of him.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
He went on to praise the families and survivors of the Grenfell disaster,
whose dignity for 7 years held up a mirror to this nation and asked us, do we really give everyone an equal voice?
In a nod to London's housing crisis, the Prime Minister promised planning reforms would give people a roof over their heads.
We're introducing new planning passports that will turbocharge house building in our inner cities.
And to critics who say the message from government has been too gloomy, he offered this.
If we take tough, long-term decisions now, then that light at the end of this tunnel, that Britain that belongs to you, we get there much more quickly.
If nothing else, Sir Keir needed to reassure members of his own party after the stumbles of recent weeks. There have been questions about his judgment following the rows over cuts to the winter fuel allowance and freebies. There was no mention of hospitality boxes at Arsenal or donations to pay for clothes, but he did offer this pledge.
Every pensioner in this country, every pensioner will be better off with Labour.
We have inherited a massive mess from the last 14 years of the Conservative government. And I think he has to get that balance right. And there was optimism there, but also an honesty that it's going to take time. It won't be easy. There will be trade-offs.
The Prime Minister reeled off a list of ambitions to make voters feel safer, healthier, happier and better off. But, in his own words, the government is only just getting started. Simon Harris, ITV News, Liverpool.
And Simon's still in Liverpool for us this evening. Simon, Sir Keir's praise of the Grenfell community wasn't the only time that the disaster was mentioned today, was it?
Yes, Yasmin, as well as hearing from the new Prime Minister, this conference has heard from many of the new MPs who were elected in July. And today it was the turn of Joe Powell, who won Kensington and Bayswater, the West London constituency, which includes Grenfell. Now, when the public inquiry published its final report into the Grenfell disaster earlier this month, Sir Keir Starmer, who's a lawyer by training, cautioned other politicians not to say anything which might prejudice the criminal proceedings. But Mr. Powell made it clear in his speech he thinks there must be criminal charges.
A report from a public inquiry is not the same as justice, important though it is. So we do need to see criminal accountability for those responsible for what happened at Grenfell Tower.
But of course it's Sir Keir's speech which is making headlines here, with many delegates digesting what he said and wondering if the message from the government is still things will get worse before they get better.
Simon, thank you.
But first, they are packing up in Liverpool tonight after what was the first taste of a party conference for London's new Labour MPs, ushered in on Sir Keir Starmer's big majority. How long they stay in the job depends on how well the Prime Minister performs. There was controversy, of course, over freebies and uncomfortable questions about winter fuel payments. So, what is the verdict of those MPs who had a front row seat? From Liverpool, here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
Miatta Fahnbulleh is on the fast track. No sooner had she been elected as Peckham's new MP, she was given a job in the government. She's now the Minister for Energy Consumers. Such a swift promotion is unusual, but not unique. Two other brand new London MPs are also in government.
My family came here as refugees when I was 7 years old. We grew up in the Sierra Leonean community that is rooted in Peckham. And what I saw in that community was people who came here, they worked hard, but there was a ceiling.
In a vintage aeroplane hundreds of feet above Holland, Bayer Alaba had a good excuse for his late arrival at the Labour conference. The new MP for Southend East and Rochford was taking part in a parachute drop to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Arnhem. He's an East End lad who joined the Paras as a teenager.
I left school with no GCSEs, and so I was pretty much, I was a little bit sort of a wild child, if you like, and certainly what I found was the army gave me stability, and it gave me a home from a home, and I picked up a family, I travelled the world, and I kind of became a really sort of happy young man. I feel like I've got a job to do, I feel like I'm on a mission. That's what it feels like now, because we're in government.
Uma Kumaran is the first British MP with a Tamil heritage. At the Liverpool Conference Centre overlooking the Mersey, she and fellow newbie Natasha Irons reflected on their political journeys.
I always say that I stumbled into politics. I really enjoyed it at school. I was on the debate team and things like that. I've always been an activist. My first job was working for the NHS, so always had sort of public service at the heart.
My family's always been very political, but we didn't really think politics was for people like us. There was lots of shouting at the telly, lots of question time. I was probably one of the only kids in my class who understood who the Chancellor was and what they did.
If they have ambition of high office, they're keeping it to themselves.
My ambition lies at being the best MP I can be.
I want to be the absolute people's voice for Stratford and Bow in Westminster.
I want to be a good constituency MP. I want people to know that I'm there for them and that I'm here to fight for them.
My main thing is to deliver, and I will do anything that the Labour Party and the Prime Minister asks me to do in order to deliver.
For a few days they've been among friends, but back in Westminster they must prove themselves to their colleagues, but most of all to their voters. Simon Harris, ITV News, Liverpool.